Welcome back to Horn Takes, your Texas football and baseball talk destination. I am Sean Redfern. It is Tuesday. We did the after action review on the Peach Bowl yesterday. That means today we're going to do the deep dive on these Ohio State Buckeyes leading up to this college football playoff semifinal matchup in the Cotton Bowl at Jerry World, hopefully on Friday. Looks like the weather forecast has gotten much better. I mean, they were talking like 8 to 10 inches of snow in Dallas, which would be absolutely obscene. And now it's looking like maybe 1 to 2 inches. So a lot better. Not out of the woods yet on danger, but a lot better than what they were initially saying. And this always happens. Like what the weather is going to be a week out, you can never count on that. Until AI gets so good that it can just, I don't know, invent weather, program the weather machines to do the weather. I don't know. A week out, it's all speculation. I mean, you get a roundabout idea. It's going to be cold. It's going to be snowy. So, I mean, I think that's good. A lot of people were kind of stressing out. What are we going to do? Are they going to play the game? Are they not going to play the game? Texas isn't prepared for that type of shit, obviously. However, if it does snow, it'll still be slick. It'll still be dangerous. There'll still be idiots out there. Please be careful as you head up to Dallas, whether you head up there on Thursday or Friday. A lot of folks will head up there on Friday, especially from Austin. It's not that far of a drive. Had we have gotten tickets through the school, we would have headed up Thursday evening. We're sitting this one out, folks. Congratulations to the North Dakota State University Bisons on their 10th national championship in 14 years. That's unbelievable. Nick Saban, who, right? I don't know if it's the same coach that's done it over this last 14 years, but if it is, how are we not knocking down that dude's door? I feel like someone told me Kalen DeBoer came from there, and I'm probably wrong on that. I should probably learn more about those types of things, but in the end, I just don't care. I don't care who's at North Dakota State. All I know is the man is really good. And even if it was Kalen DeBoer, whoever took over for him already won one. Took him about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. 10 of the last 14. My God. They play in like an indoor stadium because my first thought is like, who in the hell wants to go to North Dakota to play football? But I think they play in an indoor deal, kind of like Syracuse. Be wrong on that too. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe. We appreciate all that support. Podcast, folks, going away. And I don't mean the show, I just mean the podcast portion of the show. So if you're listening to us on iHeartRadio, you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, you're listening to us on Spotify Podcast, you're going to the Buzzsprout link I'm always talking about. After football season, we will no longer be placing episodes there. So you need to make plans to go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're doing so much stuff with video, it just does not make sense anymore to put up an audio podcast, because I'm actually analyzing plays and stuff. If you do listen to the podcast, you probably noticed over the last few weeks, you have no idea what I'm talking about because you can't see it. But now you can see it. Go over to YouTube, you can see it. You can also just listen on YouTube, just to be fair. So if you are a return listener on the podcast, whichever way you get it, go over to YouTube, find us at Horn Takes. Just search Horn Takes Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to us there. After football, that'll be it. No more podcasting. I'll have to change the name. It won't be a podcast anymore. I hadn't thought about that when I made this decision. I'll probably just leave it at Horn Takes Podcast. Deep dive on these Ohio State Buckeyes. It's a good team, folks. Statistically, they're really, really good. They're really, really good on the field. Let's talk about it. Let's match them up with this Texas team. We'll talk about the Texas offense, the Ohio State defense, Ohio State offense, the Texas defense. Texas coming in ranked number 3 in the country. These are college football playoff poll rankings, not seeds rankings. Ohio State coming in at number 6. Texas with a record of 13-2. Ohio State 12-2. You look at this Texas offense, and it's probably not as good as most people thought it would be, but it's still pretty good. And you look at this Texas defense, and it's probably a lot better than most people thought it would be. I mean, I think if you go back to, say, July of last year, and you talk to people about the offense, you talk to people about the defense at Texas, I think most people are going to tell you, I think this Texas offense is going to be really, really good. And I think this Texas defense might not be the strength of the team. They'll probably be improved, but how much will they be improved? And what's happened is this Texas defense has taken a massive step forward. And I feel like the offense is just kind of – it'll be interesting to compare this year's stats with last year's stats, but I don't feel like it's as good this year, just overall. But it's still pretty good. And if you pay attention, you're going to hear some numbers, you hear some rankings, and then you'll hear the same thing for the Ohio State offense. And what you're going to see is that Texas is better in a lot of categories. And stats don't always play out in games. We know that. But I think the general consensus is that this Ohio State team is going to beat the brakes off of Texas on Friday. And I mean, you watch the last 2 playoff games for each team. I don't blame a single soul for thinking that. I mean, if you were guaranteed to get what you've got out of Texas so far in this playoff, and you were guaranteed to get what you've gotten out of Ohio State so far in this playoff, I would pick Ohio State to beat Texas. And I wouldn't even bat an eye about it. Texas ranked 12th in total offense at 444 yards a game. This Ohio State defense ranked 1st in total defense, 245 yards a game. Something's going to have to give there, obviously. There's going to be a lot of something's going to have to give moments as we go up and down this list of stats. Passing offense, Texas 278 yards per game, 13th in the country. This Ohio State passing defense, 1st in the country, only giving up 152 yards in the air per game. Rushing offense, Texas 165 yards per game, 55th in the nation. This Ohio State rushing defense, 92 yards per game. That is good enough for 4th in the country. That is salty. Scoring offense, Texas 34 points per game, which is good for 15th. This Ohio State defense only giving up 12 points per game, good enough for 1st. That's absurd. They're good. That defense is damn good. Sacks allowed, Texas allowed 33 sacks so far this season, which is awful. Ohio State has 47 sacks on the season, which is really good. That's an area of concern for me. If you're a Texas fan, you have to be concerned going to play a defense that can really get after the quarterback, considering the fact that we have done a poor job of protecting our quarterback, even against teams that aren't really good at it. I mean, if you take away the sacks that Georgia has against Texas, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Georgia defense. I'm just saying, you take away the sacks that they had against just Texas, they don't have a lot of sacks this year. They're not like this big juggernaut of sack defense. But they find a way to drop 13 sacks on just Texas in 2 games. Turnovers lost. Texas not really good here. We've lost 24 turnovers this season. Ohio State's taken away the ball 22 times, which is okay. Not great. Pretty good. It's an area of concern. Texas seems to turn it over every single game. Third down offense, this Texas offense converting a tick over 43% of the time. That's good enough for 31st in the country. Ohio State defense only allowing conversions a tick over, well, a little bit over 34.5% of the time, which is 29th in the country. So that's kind of like one of those even matchups. Red zone offense, Texas abysmal. Terrible. A little over 78% of the time they convert in the red zone. That's good enough for 108th in the country. And honestly, a lot of those are kicks. And I saw some reports, saw some scuttlebutt on the line about Will Stone, the kickoff guy, getting a lot of reps with the ones in the field goal game. I don't know. He's a lefty. And apparently they have also practiced with a different holder because he's a lefty. I just do not buy that. I feel like that is such a huge risk. I mean, I know Bert Auburn has done his damnedest to try to cost you 2 games so far in the postseason. Played 3 postseason games, SEC championship, round 1, quarterfinals, and in 2 of those games he's missed 2 field goals. He did cost us a win against Georgia, and he damn near did against Arizona State. So it's a problem, no doubt. I said on the show last week, I think it was in Drunk Sean Thoughts. Yeah, it was in Drunk Sean Thoughts. It wasn't last week. It was like, was it yesterday? Yeah. Holy shit. Anyways, I said if Bert Auburn, no, it was Saturday, or it doesn't matter. It was in Drunk Sean Thoughts, which was the day after. It was Thursday. Last week, Thursday. I knew I didn't lose track of time that bad. Anyways, I said, if you are serious next year in 2025, Bert Auburn cannot be your kicker. I mean, he said he's coming back. There's no way that dude gets to come back if I'm Steve Sarkisian. You cannot be as bad as he's been this year at field goals and get to come back and kick on my team. I'm sorry. He has potential. Started out his career really well, but he has really fallen off this year. That being said, I don't know if you switch your holder and your kicker going into the college football semifinal. That just sounds like a huge risk to me that almost is just like, I got to do something just to do something. It's almost like when politicians do completely useless shit just so they can say we did something. That's almost what this feels like to me. And I don't think Steve Sarkisian's doing that. So if that's the case, I think Bert Auburn has to be hurt. Maybe that explains why he can't kick the ball through the uprights. I don't know. I've heard that. I've seen it. It's been reported that he was taking that Will Stone was kicking the ball with the ones. And I cannot buy that until I see it. And if I see it, I'm going to be like, what the fuck are we doing? Is what it is. Red zone defense for this Ohio State team, really good, second in the country. They allow conversions just a tick under 63% of the time. So there's some spots here when you look at this Texas offense where they don't match up well at all with this Ohio State defense. Red zone, sacks allowed, run defense against that run offense for Texas. I think those are 3 areas where Texas is severely outmatched by the Ohio State defense. Flipping around on this Texas defense versus this Ohio State offense. Texas total defense, 277 yards per game. That's good enough for 3rd in the country. Ohio State racking up 432 yards per game. 22nd in the country. 22nd. Passing defense, Texas only giving up 166 yards per game. That's good enough for 3rd. Ohio State averaging 263 per game through the air. That's 28th in the nation. Rushing defense, Texas giving up 111. They're the 12th highest ranked rushing defense in the country. And then you look at this Ohio State offense, 169 yards a game, 49th. Same kind of deal we saw with Texas versus the Ohio State defense. You're seeing the same thing with the Ohio State offense versus the Texas defense with the run game. Scoring defense, Texas 14 a game, third in the country. Ohio State averaging 36 points per game, which is good enough for sixth in the nation. Texas has 45 sacks on the season. So right up there with Ohio State in being dangerous, sacking the quarterback. Ohio State's only allowed 12 sacks all season, so they protect Will Howard. That's one of those something's going to have to give deals. Turnovers gained. Texas has taken the ball away 30 times this season. Ohio State's lost the ball more times than Texas has, 28. Not good. So there's some potential there for this Texas defense to gain an advantage over that Ohio State offense taking the ball away. Third down defense, Texas is really, really good. 31%, 31.5% roughly. Eighth in the country. They allow conversions on third down. And this Ohio State defense, not that great on third down. 42% of the time, just a little bit over 42% of the time they convert, which is good for 45th. And then the red zone area again for this offense against this defense. Not a good look for that Ohio State offense. Not as bad as the Texas disadvantage offensively, but Texas the best in the country in the red zone on defense. 61.5% conversion rate in the red zone. Ohio State only converting 87% of the time in the red zone, which is 47th in the country. So a lot of what we see with this Texas offense matching up with this Ohio State defense, we see in the similar manner if you flip it around. So it looks like two really, really outstanding defenses and two good offenses that have some weaknesses. I think where you're getting the whole, Ohio State's going to blow Texas out deal from is just looking at how these offenses have performed in the playoffs. Ohio State's looked vastly better. I mean, Ohio State has done some country shit kickings on both the teams they've played in the playoffs. And Texas gotten big leads, taking their foot off the gas, and gotten themselves in games in both of the playoffs. One of them really close. Clemson game was a one-score game headed into in the fourth quarter. Arizona State takes them to overtime. And it took a 4th and 13, 28-yard touchdown pass by Quinn Ewers to force that overtime. So I get it. Also get statistics, and I also know statistics don't always bear out on the field. But this whole idea that, on paper, Ohio State is just a juggernaut and Texas is not is pretty false. Their defenses are about the same statistically in most categories. And Texas has a little bit better offense statistically. We're obviously going to see how it plays out on Friday. This offense led by senior quarterback Will Howard. He's pretty good this season. 268 completions on 369 attempts for just shy of 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He also has 82 carries for 165 yards and 7 touchdowns. So he's a little bit mobile. To me, he's in between like a Quinn Ewers and a Sam Leavitt that we just saw against Arizona State. Sam Leavitt, outstanding at extending the play, getting himself into position to get a pass off. I don't think we're going to see that out of Will Howard, but I think he's probably a little bit more mobile than Quinn. I think Quinn and Will Howard are guys that can hurt you with their feet if they see something open up and they're very decisive about it, but they're not going to like out athlete you the way we saw Sam Leavitt kind of pull off some magic tricks in that Peach Bowl. Couple of guys head up this rushing attack. 5'10", 208-pound senior Travion Henderson. He's got 126 totes for 925 yards, 10 touchdowns. That's 7.3 yards per carry. Outstanding. He also has 26 catches for 209 yards. So he's a weapon out of the backfield. Then your big back, 6 foot, 219-pound junior Quinshawn Judkins, transfer from Ole Miss, I believe. 174 carries for 924 yards, 10 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per carry. He's got 17 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. They're dangerous. They got almost two 1,000-yard backs. Hopefully they don't after Friday. Hopefully they have none 1,000-yard backs after Friday. If Texas does that, I think Texas wins the game. Just saying. Could be wrong. It's a dangerous group, and you don't hear about the running backs that much with this Ohio State team because you got 6'3", 215-pound freshman phenom Jeremiah Smith. He leads the Buckeyes in receiving. He's got 70 catches, 1,224 yards, 14 touchdowns, 17.5 yards per completion, per catch. You talk about like a Bolitnikoff guy. To me, that's a Bolitnikoff guy. Not to take anything away from Travis Hunter, but this Jeremiah Smith guy will win the Bolitnikoff. 100%. No doubt in my mind. If they can find a quarterback to get him the ball. Will Howard's other sort of big target guy he likes to go to a lot, 6'1", 205-pound senior Emeka Egbuka. He's got 70 catches for 896 yards, 10 touchdowns, 12.8 yards per catch. So there's two guys right there on the receiving side that, I mean, he's close to 1,000 yards. Jeremiah Smith way over 1,000 yards. So they got two almost 1,000-yard rushers, two almost 1,000-yard receivers. And then they got a third guy, 6'3", 191-pound sophomore, Tate Carnell, 43 catches, 611 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's sitting at 14.21 yards per catch. This is an explosive group. And then you round it out with a 6'3", 243-pound senior tight end, Scott G. Jr., 21 catches, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10.43 yards per catch. So these guys have some skill players. For sure. This offensive line for Ohio State, a lot of adversity this season, tons of injuries, I believe. I think I heard the Rose Bowl announcers say they've played a combination of 23 different guys on the like 23 different combinations of O-line. I mean, maybe that's what they said, but I find that hard to believe that's true. I guess it could be. If that's true, that is wild. Tackles are junior and a senior. Interior guys are all underclassmen, redshirt freshmen, a couple of redshirt sophomores. They're pretty big, 6'5" on average, 317 pounds on average, very athletic. And listen, I don't give a damn how many people have played. I don't care how many different combinations of offensive line Ohio State's had to put out there. They've got to be good. Or else these skill guys wouldn't have the stats they have. And this bunch has given up 0 sacks in 2 playoff games. Tennessee, a pretty good defense. I don't know about Oregon. I don't think they're probably that great on defense. But Tennessee certainly was. And they couldn't do nothing with them. Point being, I think when you start to talk about this is it's really all about matchups. It's really all about individuals winning battles. Ohio State's statistically not as good offensively as Texas, but they got some players. They could beat you. I mean, we've seen what they've done the last 2 weeks. Defensively, everybody talks about Caleb Downs. I'm sure he's a great player. My guy on this defense is senior linebacker Cody Simon. 97 tackles, 11 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 7 pass breakups, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. There is nothing that Cody Simon cannot and does not do on this defense. 100%, in my opinion, the best player on this defense. Senior cornerback Burke Denzel and junior cornerback Davison Igbidnasoon lead the Buckeyes in interceptions with 2 apiece. They each have 11, or they don't each have 11. They got 11 pass breakups between them, which is pretty damn good. Igbidnasoon having the bulk of those with 9 himself. And I hope I'm saying that name right. I'm probably not. Condolences. My apologies. They're led in tackles for loss and sacks by 6'5", 269-pound edge JT Kumoaloa. Not sure on that one. That's what I'm going to say. He's got 49 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 5 QB hurries, and 2 forced fumbles. Defensive line is averaging 6'4", 289 pounds. They're big. Their ends are 269, 265. They got a 300-pounder in the middle and a guy that's just shy of 300 pounds. Very athletic. They don't have like that big anchor man like you see with Florida or you see with Kentucky. They don't have like a Tavondre Sweat type. But they're big enough in the middle and they're athletic enough in the middle that they just blow up all kinds of shit. They got 8 sacks against Oregon last week alone, this defense. That didn't all come from the defensive line. But they got a lot of pressure on Oregon. They had 4 against Tennessee in round 1. So we're talking 12 sacks in the last 2 games by this defensive front. Final thoughts on this Ohio State team. Been talking offense. We've been talking personnel, how good they are. We've been talking statistics. What we haven't talked about is Chip Kelly, one of the best offensive minds in football. He's got a lot of chess pieces to play with. He's got a lot of weapons to deploy. And he's one of the best ever at like just getting people open, being creative, getting guys in mismatches. They scheme people wide the hell open all the time. Go watch the Oregon game. Go watch the Rose Bowl if you did not see it to see what I'm talking about. A lot of different formations, a lot of different motion. They line people up in different positions. The first play of the game against Oregon, they line the tight end up as a running back. They send him in motion out to the outside into trips. 2 guys run down the field, full freaking blast. They run a little pump fake like they're just going to dump it off to the wide receiver. Basically, they make it look like this tight end's coming out there to block for the wide receiver on the little quick screen. Instead of blocking, he just wheels up the sideline, wide ass open because the 2 other guys have run everybody deep. That's Chip Kelly. So Texas is going to have to do a really good job knowing where people are at and communicating that people aren't where they should be at. Hopefully making some plays. Hopefully knowing what's coming. This Oregon offense, they love to push it down the field. That's a Chip Kelly thing. Has been forever. And they do it pretty damn well. Will Howard having an outstanding year. I don't think he's any better than he was at Kansas State. He certainly has better weapons around him. And he can throw the ball pretty accurately. And by accurately, I just mean he's kind of getting it out there where those guys can go make plays. I mean, Will Howard is not threading needles and throwing between 2 men in coverage. Like, he's not doing those types of things. But what he will do for you is identify where to get the ball, and he'll put it in a spot almost every time where his guys can go make a play on it. And he's got Jeremiah Smith, who's really good at just jumping up and catching the ball. Like, he's going to elevate a lot of passes to Jeremiah Smith because he's 6'3", he's long, he can jump, and he's got great hands. So Will Howard does not have to be perfect to be really good in this offense. And he's not. And if Texas can get him in a position where he has to be perfect, advantage Texas. Because we've seen Will Howard get rattled by this Texas defense before. He was at Kansas State. He's 0-3 against Texas. I will say he's playing pretty unconscious right now, especially in the playoffs. So one of the questions is, can this Texas defense figure out a way to rattle him early? I think you get him rattled early and get him sort of off of this high he's on right now, these last two games. Good spot to be if you're the Texas defense. Bad spot to be if you're Will Howard. We haven't talked a whole lot about the running game. We've been talking a lot about wide receivers and Will Howard, but these backs, they have good size and speed. They're gonna employ like a power rushing attack, lots of counter. They get downhill. And man, the offensive line blocks it. Texas is gonna have to be really strong at the point of attack. And they have been all season. I mean, I don't if Ohio State's able to do what they did against Oregon, and I don't even remember how many attempts they had, but it wasn't a ton. But they broke off some big plays because they just absolutely dominated that line of scrimmage. If they can do that against Texas, I think all bets are. I mean, if that happens, best case scenario for Texas is they win the game in like a shootout, like it's 50 something to 40 something type of game. I mean, and I would say the same goes for the opposite direction. If Texas can run the ball like they did against Clemson, against Ohio State, Ohio State's in trouble. And their best shot's going to be some kind of shootout win. We said Cody Simon's our guy on defense, man. He is all over the place. He's the do everything, be everywhere guy. He gets downhill really nicely from his middle linebacker position in the run game. He matches up well in the pass game. He can rush the passer from the blitz. He can rush the passer off the edge. He spied a lot on Dylan Gabriel and ended up sacking him multiple times in that Rose Bowl victory. He's an absolute problem. Texas will need to know where he is at, just like he reminds me a ton of number 0 wearing burnt orange, Ant Hill Jr. Teams better know where he's at. And you better know where Cody Simon is because that dude can play. So Ohio State defense, we talked about it. They've been lighting up the quarterback all playoffs. 8 sacks in 2 games. No, 12. What is it? Let me go back and look. 12 sacks in 2 games. Pretty ridiculous. And they don't bring like a ton of pressure to do it either. I mean, they really rely on that front 4 to get pressure and that back end to play lots of coverage behind it. They will blitz. They'll blitz, defensive backs. They'll blitz linebackers. But generally speaking, their back end is really good, and their front 4 gets so much pressure. They play off each other really well. That back end will cover for long enough that those front 4 guys can get pressure. And so from a quarterback perspective, and you saw it a lot for Dylan Gabriel, you drop back, you're looking downfield, you don't see any place to go with the ball. Then you start to feel the pressure. So you start to try to move around, and then all of a sudden they're all 4 tackling you. They're nice and even. Like, I mean, and it's fast paced. It's not slow. Like they're gonna get back there pretty quickly, but it's like all of them. We talked about Texas last year having a lot of pressure up the middle, none off the edge, and it never seemed like we got more than one guy in the backfield getting pressure on the quarterback at a time. And that's what cost Texas in the games they lost last year from a defensive perspective. We see Texas a lot better at it this year. Ohio State certainly really well at it, really good at it. I think if you're Quinn Ewers, you're going to have to process a lot in a really small amount of time, and you're going to have to be sound with your mechanics to be successful. We can't do the whole back up, throw it off our back foot, expect it to, be a miracle play. They're going to get pressured. But if Texas can protect, if they can hold up front, guys are going to get open. You can't cover forever. Even with a lot of coverage in the back end, you can't keep people covered up forever. Look at this Ohio State team. I think they've struggled in 4 games this season. Penn State, and I say struggled, they won 3 of them. But they didn't have the same type of output that we've seen in some of the other games. Penn State, Oregon the first time, Nebraska, and Michigan. And in all 4 of those games, the opponent protected their quarterback really well. And they were able to affect Will Howard. Not sack him, just kind of keep him off his game, force mistakes. And again, I think this Texas defense much better than anything Ohio State's seen so far this year. I think this is a really tough matchup for Texas. Honestly, I think it's a tough matchup for Ohio State as well. But where I'm concerned is offensively matching up against that Ohio State defense. And kind of how that affects the flow of the game. That's my biggest concern. This Ohio State offense does things really well that Texas has kind of struggled with the last couple games in these playoffs, the ball down the field. Saw Clemson really catch fire in the second half. Saw the same thing from Arizona State. Just getting the ball down the field. Yeah, one of them was a trick play. I don't care. They got the ball down the field. And we didn't defend it very well. They protect the QB really, really well, which is the strength of Texas's defense. Kind of sneaky with that run game, but it's really effective. Outstandingly effective. To me, this Ohio State defensive front 7 reminds me a whole lot of the Georgia front 7 when you talk about size, athleticism, just the way they kind of approach the game. Saw Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat last year just blowing up everything inside. I mean, just bodies flying. That's how that Georgia defensive front plays, and that's how that Ohio State defensive front plays. So Ohio State run defense, like without a doubt, 100% the best run defense that this Texas offense will face all season. So I think it's a tough matchup. I don't think that means Texas can't win the game. Texas is very talented. Texas could get dominated in certain areas of this game and make some big plays and win the game. I think the same thing for Ohio State. I really think whichever offense figures out a way to get something done against the other defense is going to be the one that wins this game, because I think the defenses are going to be really good. I haven't seen the over-under yet on this game. I assume it's pretty low. But then again, maybe people are drinking that Ohio State offense Kool-Aid. So there's a deep dive on the Ohio State Buckeyes. We'll be back tomorrow night. We're going to do a live stream with Mike Hardball Harge and the world's strongest man, Mark Henry, of 1300 AM The Zone out of Austin. We've had Harge on the show a bunch of times. We've never got to meet Mark Henry, so I'm excited about that. We'll talk about the college football Playoff Semis. It's going to go off 5 or 5:30. So check Twitter, check YouTube. Once we get the time nailed down, I will make sure to get that stuff out there. We'll definitely be back on Thursday with 4 keys and a prediction for the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. Find us on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Remember, the pod's going away after football season. Subscribe and follow to those places to get lots of cool information. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. Get hooked.